All right, Steve. Well, let's make a start. We've got a couple of attendees that have come through, and I'm sure we'll see a few more coming through as well. As I said earlier, Steve, thank you again for making some time. Matt Brown sends his apologies. Unfortunately, unwell at the moment, but he will join us for the next webinar in this series. Look, buying your first warehouse, a three-part series. So this webinar series that we're producing is really to, I guess, help our audience understand and unpack that process of buying your first warehouse. We know that some of our webinars had been about, averaging about 30 minutes. So we wanted to really cut some of them up and parcel up the information to make it a bit easier for people to digest. So today's the first webinar in this series. And if you have subscribed into this webinar series, you will receive notifications to join into the others. But this one will really start that first step in the process as well. But as we say in most of our webinars, please send through your questions and suggestions through on chat, or send through an email to digital@tsimos.com.au. We do monitor that inbox, and we do love the feedback that we receive from people about these webinars and the potential topics that you would like for us to explore. So, look, Steve, let's talk a little bit about, I guess, this series of the webinar and I guess the different ones that we'll be running in this series. So, what we'd hoped to really cover, I guess, is the first one is really positioning yourself to buy. Now, I mean, positioning yourself to buy, Steve, there's a bit of, I guess, ambiguity in that. What do we really mean by positioning yourself to buy? And that's what we'll explore today. What do we really mean in that sense?
It's a very important consideration, particularly for younger people, if they're buying their first investment property or buying their first property to put their business in. And in my experience, many of them don't look at the longer term scenario of the entity in which they buy a property. So the first thing I would recommend to anybody is to look at what entity you want to buy the property in, and the options you have are in your own name, in joint names, in a company name, in a unit trust, or in a self-managed super fund. So they're the options, and those options, depending on which one you choose, will affect the result in the long term when you approach or enter your retirement age. So my strong advice to anyone who's listening who's looking to buy their first commercial property, either as an investment or indeed as an owner-occupier, would be to seek some really good quality financial advice from your accountant or from a qualified financial advisor. This will put you in the right position based on current tax law, and the best position tax-wise when you reach your retirement age. Now, of course, tax laws do change from time to time, in fact, regularly, sadly. So we can't anticipate what the tax laws will be in the future. But what we can do is, based on current legislation, plan for the best tax outcome when we hit retirement.
Yeah, and that's really what we'll focus on today, is just unpacking a little bit further into that topic and bits and pieces. And then in the second webinar that we'll do, we'll talk a little bit about choosing the right property, leasing versus buying, how to negotiate. And then finally, making the best long-term decision in the third part of this series will really be about making sure that you're understanding how to pick the right property for those long-term goals that you're looking to achieve. And Steve, as you'd be well aware, a lot of the landlords that we work with at Tsimos have made those decisions and have lived with, I guess, their portfolio now growing into retirement as well. So that'll be an exciting one to cover off. So look, to really kick this off, I mean, Steve, we were talking about this earlier this morning and certainly last week as well. One of the important parts when embarking on that journey to purchase your first warehouse or any property, I guess, is to understand the goals of what you're looking to achieve. I mean, in your experience, what are some of those examples of the immediate goals that people are coming to you with when they're saying, "Oh, I'm looking for a warehouse for my business"? What are some of the things they're looking to achieve pretty quickly?
Okay, as far as that's concerned, you've got two types of purchases. You've got the investor and, of course, the owner-occupier. In terms of an owner-occupier, your immediate goals obviously would be to find a property that's going to suit your business, whether you're moving from home or your business is expanding and you need a bigger premises. Obviously that's the immediate goal. Let's find something that suits my business.
Yeah.
And that's based on obviously the type of property it is and floor space, ceiling height, car parking, and whatever else you may need for your business. and location, obviously, which is the number one rule in real estate. You've obviously, in terms of buying property that's going to appreciate in value and in rental value, you look to buy something that's in a good position, in a good location, a proven location. So they're the sort of issues. But the immediate goals certainly are trying to house the business. And in terms of an investor, immediate goals would be that they've got some money to invest. They want to put it into an investment property. They want to earn a better rate of interest than they can in the bank or with their managed super funds. So that's the goal. The immediate goal is let's park our money somewhere where we're going to get a reasonable return and capital growth over a period.
Yeah, and you would say the typical investor is definitely looking short, long-term goals in that investment. But when it's a business, it's really about aligning. I mean, I think aligning what those business goals are to the premise that you want to be. And if you're buying your first warehouse, you might have some immediate need for space, but understanding short and long-term, you don't want to pick up and move your business all of the time as well. So I guess it's important to look at how those business goals align into that property. Yeah.
But it's important though to marry the two up. That is your short-term immediate goals, with your long-term investment goals. Because whether you're buying a property for investment or owner-occupier, ultimately that property is an investment, whichever way you look at it. So you've got to marry the two goals up in as good a way as you can, so that you achieve both results. Something that's going to improve and grow your business, something that's going to improve and grow your investment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, Steve, to talk about that, and this is one of the big things that you were suggesting, owners can really, I guess, benefit from, is really positioning, or potential owners in positioning themselves in the right space to buy. And I found this a really interesting idea, the idea of structuring yourself correctly and having all of this pre-work done. I mean, let's talk about that comment you were saying earlier about structuring. What do we mean when setting up the right structure, I guess, to purchase your first commercial property, whether it is an investment or your business premise?
The ultimate aim and the ultimate goal is to put yourself in a position from a tax perspective that limits and minimises the amount of tax you might have to pay in retirement if you're looking at that sort of long term. Now, you've got options, as I said earlier, in your own name, in joint names, in a company name, in a unit trust, or in a self-managed super fund. Now, your accountant and your financial advisor will advise you the best way for your particular needs and the best way it will work for you. But I can give you an example of a client who owned a commercial property and has owned it for a number of years. And a few years ago, it was valued at around about $6 million, but it was in a company name, in a unit trust. As he approached retirement age, his accountant said to him, look, to get the best tax position on the income you'll receive from this property, and if you sell it the capital gain, you need to put this property into a super fund, into your self-managed super fund, which he had set up, but prior to buying this property. So he did that, but unfortunately he had to pay over $300,000 in stamp duty to transfer that to his super fund. But the benefits outweighed the cost, because subsequently, some years later, the property was sold for $10 million, and his capital gains tax was minimal. So if you had have planned that prior, there would have been zero stamp duty payable and the same benefits. So that's just an example of how long-term planning can really save you a lot of money and put you in a far stronger financial position when you retire.
Yeah, and that's why, when we talked in that slide before about making sure you're understanding those immediate, short and long-term goals, being able to take those goals into the right structure, I guess, can avoid some of those pitfalls which might happen in the future in terms of how you've purchased, or, even as an example, if you're working in a business with partnership and potentially you want to be able to, sell certain sections of the organisation but not impact the premise and those sorts of things as well. I guess it comes down to that, making sure that the business plan and your goals are understood, so the structure can be put right in place at the right time to buy as well. Are there any structures that you see typically, Steve, where most people will purchase through? Is it do most people purchase it in their own name, as an example?
No, that's not the case at all, really. Most people tend to use the unit trust structure, because you can distribute income with unit holders and sort of help minimise tax. Now, I have to stress, I'm not giving financial advice.
No.
Okay,
Not at all.
It's horses for courses. So,
Yeah.
and I'm going to say this: please seek advice from your accountant and financial advisors, qualified financial advisors, because everyone's situation is different. But that's just an example, and I've seen probably the majority of commercial properties I've seen purchased in a unit trust environment.
Yeah. And when we say, I guess, in that next step, Steve, because I mean, for me, the example I'll use here is just in the past, 15 to 20 years, there's been a number of changes in the things that you can do. Like we're even looking at things like self-managed super. Some people might not have been aware that that was a structure. I mean, I think most people now understand that structure, but once it didn't exist, I mean, seeking sound financial advice, we've obviously got our accountants, we've got our financial planners, but everyone in that process sort of has a different lens, I guess, to what they're trying to achieve. Yeah. So seeking that sound financial advice is not just about how to structure, it's also about what are those financial goals you're looking for. Yeah.
The important thing here is, and I'm probably as guilty as anybody, is to take that long-term view of property ownership, of investment property ownership, and taking the home out of the family home out of the equation. The long-term view, because that will put you in that much stronger position as you get older and as you approach retirement age.
And obviously in this, when we're talking about, purchasing your first warehouse, I mean, that can be a significant investment at any level, depending on your business size, or whether it's a small or big warehouse, it's still a reasonable size investment. Most people will use loans or investment providers to be able to provide the financials they need. When we talk about here about having your financials ready or have your financials ready, what are we really saying there, Steve? Is it about having your loan approvals done? How does that help or position you?
I think once you've established the structure and you've had the advice that you need, you then can get approval for an amount of money you can borrow based on the amount of money you can put in, et cetera, from your financial provider, whether it's a bank or a whatever they are, another lending
broker or lender.
But have all that information, have all that done, because once you've got all your ducks in a row in terms of setting the structure up, having loan approvals, you're then in a much stronger position to negotiate with vendors, because you can buy a property unconditionally. And it's the old adage of a bird in the hand, two in the bush. In terms of the vendor, if he's got three people interested in a property, one's an unconditional offer, which is perhaps a little lower than the conditional ones. 9 times out of 10, they'll choose the unconditional offer because they know it's sold.
Yeah, it's done. Yeah.
Subject to finance, subject to setting up a super fund, subject to accountant's approval or whatever, is fine, but it's not going to show a lot of strength in terms of your offer. So first things first, and this is, I know it sounds very basic, but it's actually very true. Put yourself in a position to make an unconditional offer. Once you do that, you're in a strong negotiating position as a buyer.
Yeah, and in a market where we have, at the moment, I mean, over the past few weeks, we've been really exploring the limited stock and bits and pieces, which is driving prices higher. So making sure that your offer's the strongest on the table, irrespective of just the value of your offer, but also those sorts of conditions can really put you in a strong position against what is heavy competition at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But that's awesome. That's awesome. All right. Well, look, it's a very light view there just of that first process. So Steve, we spoke about that, getting the structure right, sound financial advice, making sure that you've got the funding to be able to purchase. All of that's really based around making sure you do some goal setting. I mean, if there's anyone out there who would like some further advice or commentary, always reach out to Steve and he can provide you with or point you in.
Right. Anything you need, we can certainly try and assist in any way we can.
Yeah, point you in the right direction of some of those people. Sometimes it's hard to know who to speak to as well about that advice, or even potential lenders that might be out there that we've worked with before. So certainly,
we can certainly give you some direction if you like. But just in closing, I just want to point out that over the next 2 episodes of this series, we will be looking at some specific examples of properties. We'll be looking about how to fund them, and we'll be looking at what returns, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to look at not only new properties, we're going to look at existing and older properties. Awesome. And compare the advantages and disadvantages of both. Again, not giving you any financial advice, but just the basics of why you would buy a new one and why you might look at an older one, etc. But that'll come in the next couple of series. I look forward to it. Is it weekly or bi-weekly?
Each fortnight. So we'll run this each fortnight, which is going to be fantastic. I mean, I've obviously learned a lot just in this process of exploring this with yourself and Matt, Steve. So I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of the series. The next one we'll really be exploring here will be leasing versus buying. So sort of looking at those two different value metrics for how a business might make that decision, what to look for. And this one's my favorite, Steve, which is how to negotiate. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. So look, thanks everyone. Short and sharp today. Hopefully there's some good value in there, and we look forward to seeing you in our next webinar. Thanks so much, Steve, for the time.
Feel free to contact me anytime if you need, if you want to answer any answers to any questions. Thanks.
Cheers, guys. See ya.
Bye.